Well, will earnings results from Apple and Amazon tell us if we are in a recession? Could it do such a thing?
Let's ask our Fox panel, including Biz Radio Network host Mike Norman. David Darst is back from Morgan Stanley, and Peter Schiff, author of Crash Proof. Mike, first to you. What do you think?
Look, I don't really think so. The combined revenues of both Apple and Amazon, about $40 billion. That's about, what, 0.2% of all final sales in the United States.
But other companies are tied right in there. AT&T with Apple.
Yeah, but look, Exxon is going to earn $150 billion more next year. Exports in real terms were just about as much as what consumption, PCE, personal consumption, was in the fourth quarter last year. So, if it's a barometer of whether or not consumers are going to these little consumer goods and gadgets, perhaps. But does it tell us if we're in a recession? I doubt it.
Let's sharpen the focus then, David, and look and say that if iPods and these Mac Airs are so expensive, but people are still buying them, does that mean that the recession hasn't spilled over yet to the higher-end consumer?
No question about it, Liz. You've got to keep four numbers in mind. Minus 13%. That's the Wall Street consensus for the quarter that we're in now. And we're about two-thirds of the way through on the earnings reports.
Okay.
Minus 2% is the second quarter estimate, plus 17%, plus 66% against the lousy fourth quarter.
You do the math.
That's right. And it ends up being plus 14%. And if these numbers, Amazon and Apple, can give you some indication as to the overall consumer who plays, yes, it's small, but a tempest in a teacup, which is a Shakespearean phrase,
Happy
which
birthday.
is his birthday today and his death day, April 23rd, if that can give you some small indication as to the consumer's proclivity to spend right now. And that's going to call where we're going. And tied into that is jobs.
Well, first of all, it doesn't really matter what these earnings are. We're in a recession regardless. I don't know why anybody needs any
according
additional
to
evidence.
Peter Schiff.
No, according to reality. But, even if they can manage better earnings, a lot of the earnings are going to come from abroad. And sure, Americans are still spending, but look what they're doing to do it. They're borrowing. They're going deeper into debt. The creditors are losing money. And this whole apparatus where foreigners lend money and we spend it.
But even if it is from abroad, look at what happened to McDonald's. McDonald's got a nice boost from the sales abroad.
So did IBM, so did Caterpillar, so did Johnson & Johnson.
We're a global economy, Peter. You would know that.
Because the dollars they're earning are of diminished value. Now, companies like McDonald's
have earned in one quarter 40%, which is more than the dollar has fallen since 2002. Earnings growth has far surpassed the decline. Yes, it has, Peter.
Look at the increase in the cost of living. Look at the fall in the value. It's not 40%. What do you think our companies are earning 40% more?
So what Peter's saying, David, is you don't get a sense from Apple or Amazon numbers whether we're in a recession. We're in a recession. So what do we get? What message does come from these two companies about the health of the economy?
Liz, we've got to look at next week. Next week is the Fed, on Tuesday, Wednesday. It's a two-day meeting, as you know. And Friday is the jobs numbers. And our current estimate is for minus 50,000. I think this is going to play into the psychology, the psyche, the sense of well-being of the consumer. When they see those jobs, that would be 4 months of negative if it is minus 50,000. That'll bring us to about minus 282 for the years thus far. And that will cause the 138 million people who are employed to cut back their spending. So I think we can look at this as an indication, real time, Apple, and look at Amazon and see whether people are spending.
Weekly. Hold on, Mike. Sandra Smith, you wanted to take on something that Peter said. Go ahead.
Well, as far as international sales, it's going to be huge in this report for Apple today. Soleil Securities actually added up 38% of Apple sales come from abroad. So this could provide a lot of financial cushion for them. One other thing, podcast sales way up. So when you talk about the slowdown we've seen in the economy and how could Apple prevail throughout that, as far as podcasts, audience grew 38% over the past year. Video podcasts up 45%. So regardless of what's happening here, more and more people are turning to these podcasts, and Apple has 3/4 of the MP3 market. So it doesn't matter what's happening at this point in the economy. More and more people are using these methods of entertainment, I guess you could say. So that's why everybody, when you answer the question, why aren't they affected by the slowdown in the economy? That's it. People are still buying them. There's a lot of people that still don't have them.
$1.99 for a song is like, the lipstick indicator that they used to talk about. Everybody's going to still spend $6 on a lipstick.
Yeah, but as long as the dollar is losing value, American exporters are going to earn more dollars, but big deal. The bottom line is, what is the purchasing power that the shareholders earn?
Shareholders get profits in both dollars and euros.
profits are growing. Profits are growing faster than the decline in the exchange value of the dollar. So that's why the
maybe in oil companies, but not for the economy in general.
Across a broad spectrum. Look, Liz, you said we're in a recession. In 1991, weekly unemployment claims were in the 500,000 per week. We're at 370 now. In 1982, when we were in a deep recession, they were running almost 700,000 claims.
Yeah, but we're just getting started.
Jobs, 370,000 is consistent with stable, moderate.
Well, let's see where we are next year, Mike.
Do you think Peter's right that we are just warming up and that the jobs picture will markedly decline?
You've got to look at. I think you've got to look at housing, and we're only 10% of the 25% estimated decline. That's nationwide.
Housing's only 4% of GDP.
Well, but I think too,
exports are much bigger.
There's a wealth effect to it, Michael, that I think works into people's psyche and psychology, and I think that is the most important thing right now. And this is the key.
It's not just their psyche, though; it's their actual spending.
Of a decline in housing. You don't think the wealth effect has already, to some extent, played into?
You got 24 trillion in households have 24 trillion in house prices. There's leverage there for a lot of folks.
Let me just ask David, are you surprised that despite the slowdown in all indicators, even some that are yet to come, that people are still buying this stuff? Amazon comes out with products that are so exciting.
Go to a restaurant here in Manhattan, the things are jammed. I cannot
because of foreigners.
It
does surprise you.
Well, it's not just foreigners. It's your BlackBerry generation too, Peter. It's and let me tell you, the greatest generation is the greatest generation. Liz, your father and my father. Okay, the ones I'm worried about.
My father.
Also, your father. Okay, who made you the man you are.
Peter's.
And the BlackBerry generation are going to discover things. The ones we got to worry about are the baby boomers who are narcissistic and selfish and are going to screw their parents and their children.
You know, one of the things on housing
Me
that's
too.
important, most people still haven't resigned themselves to the fact that their houses are worth so much less. People haven't made that mental adjustment to their psyche. They still think their houses were worth what they were, or they're going to come.
Rate. I mean, back in 1982, we had almost a 12% unemployment.
It would be 12% now if we kept score the right way.
7.5% unemployment rate in 1991.
But we don't keep,
incomes have been rising. As a matter of fact, in the last 5 months, incomes have risen faster than the inflation rate. Let's hope that persists. Yes, they have. Look at the numbers.
Mike paints a very positive picture, and I'm all for being positive, but I know people out there suffering, David. I know they are. We've seen all of this, and then you see the high oil prices, gasoline. You know, it's getting very difficult.
It's going to be putting pressure on the consumer this year, I think, no question. And we think we're not nearly a third of the way through the dislocation in the economy, although we may be 50% of the way through the dislocation in the financial sector.
Nothing is worse business-wise than losing your job. What do you think it's going to go up to, the unemployment rate?
Well, the unemployment rate could go up to 6+. You know?
All right. Gang, we got to leave it at that. You can't give them. A phone call from Eric Schmidt from Google to Jerry Yang from Yahoo suggesting that perhaps he could help him out with his Microsoft problem. Now, we don't know much more about this story than what I just told you, but they are looking into a phone call on a cell phone from Eric Schmidt to Jerry Yang. More on that in a moment. But then there's another story involving this as well, and that involves whether or not this trial deal between Yahoo and Google was legal or not, considering our antitrust laws.
So let's bring in the panel. Now, what would grab the attention of the investigators, David Darst, with this?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Liz, is to make sure they're defining the market correctly. I remember Nicholas Katzenbach on the last day of Lyndon Johnson's administration going after IBM for 12 years, doubled the length of World War II. So you want to make sure that you're defining this right. This stuff is so fluid. Microsoft was the big gorilla a few years ago, and while they've spent $40 billion on research and development, Yahoo, eBay, and Google have all sprouted up away from them. And so you need to look at this in a very, very broad global perspective and global market definition. The market will be something different in a few years. And so they have to basically make sure if they're going to go after Yahoo and Microsoft or Yahoo and Google hooking up together, eBay, China, India are all doing things that are going to affect this.
You know, a lot of our antitrust laws were written back when the original Rockefeller, John D., was still alive.
1911.
They were focused on industries. They were focused on industries
I think that was 1911, if I remember correctly.
They focus
That was
not
the breakup.
on
That was the
the way,
breakup. That was the
not
breakup.
on the way our world works now, but on the way the world worked then. And so the laws and the investigators are way behind the times. How can they possibly apply those rules to today's standards?
Well, that's one argument, and it also appears that there's some overreach here by the DOJ. I mean, nothing happened. I mean, even if it was a test, they didn't come out and declare that, hey, we're going to hook up and merge. And then I think you have a case where it's proper to investigate, does this pose, or does this violate antitrust?
Peter, let me give you a number here. Here's a metric on, coming from Reuters and Dow Jones. Basically, they're saying if combined, Google and Yahoo would have 80% of the market. You can't do that when you've got the Department of Justice looking at something and saying, now you're controlling it and you can control all kinds of prices.
Look, the only thing that troubles me here is that the Department of Justice has this information. Where'd they get this phone call? How are they tapping phones? I mean, how do they have this information, and why are they even looking into it?
That may have been reported in the media.
Well, I don't know. Well, who's reporting a private phone call? They're going to look into it. They said, or they have a recording of it. I think the government should stay out of it. I mean, businessmen should be allowed to talk amongst themselves. It's not going to hurt the consumers if these companies are talking.
He said he's going to help him with his Microsoft problem. Maybe his computer's down.
That's all. It was very innocent.
There's his excuse.
That's
But
right.
they have just as much right to look at Yahoo as Microsoft does, or any other company.
Yeah, the thing is, there was no deal done. I mean, I don't see what the harm is.
Well, there was a temporary deal, if you can use that word, for them to get together in this test program, and that was pretty much out in the open.
Does anybody care about this Bristol-Myers issue with the executive vice president, former Mr. Bodnar, now may face prison time because he lied about a drug that they make, Plavix, to Apotex, which is Canada's largest pharmaceutical company.
Liz, the other part you guys very properly brought up is the market definition and antitrust and so forth. That's one thing. Lying is another total different thing. And I think that the country and the regulators have very, very zero tolerance for lying in today's world. And so if that's true, then that's going to be very, very difficult for him and possibly for the company.
Yeah, I think especially in something like pharmaceuticals, drugs, people's lives depend on that. Trust and faith, exactly. I agree.
It also leads to questions about the current standards of laws. Of course, we saw the laws really change dramatically in the past couple of years, particularly after the scandals of Enron, et cetera. Is there going to be another go-around if we have more of these scandals come up now?
Well, unfortunately, the government is taking every opportunity it can to seize additional power. I mean, look at the new powers they're talking about giving the Federal Reserve. I mean, the more problems the government creates, the more it interferes with the economy.
That was unfettered Wall Street that went crazy with all this financial engineering. It was like Goldman Sachs gave him a watch and said, okay, goodbye. We'll take care of everything now. We're in charge.
Why did it happen?
They're coming in now when they should have been regulated in the first place.
No, if the Fed had a decent monetary policy, they had normal interest rates, none of this ever would have happened.
Normal interest.
Blame the Fed. It's Bernanke's fault.
Don't you love the juxtaposition of David Durst right in the middle of this argument?
I'm not saying Wall Street is impartial.
David, go ahead.
Green room.
I think John D. Rockefeller lived to be 99 years old, and he lived from 1837 until 1936. And the thing was broken up in 1911.
Which was a mistake. They never should have done it.
He had 90%. But the breaking up of them, they all became very, very big
Standard Oil should have been left
tigers.
They sure did.
We're going to have to break up this argument as we listen to the closing bell on a day when the market did pretty well. Of course, a lot of attention on what's going to happen with Amazon and Apple. We will find out those numbers coming up shortly. But